I'm Nicola Talent, and you're listening to Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the sins of the underworld. We're Ireland's top podcast for 2025, and now we've got a new website. So if you want to learn more about crime and criminals, if you want stories, extras, and podcast subscriber specials, go to www.crimeworld.com. For the viewers, I just want to tell you that Niall is worried he looks blue.
Well,
Smurf-like.
Well, I'm sure I look beautiful either way.
You do look a bit blue.
A bit blue, yeah. So, you know that most of the people...
That's why I said for the viewers. I said for the viewers.
Do you remember you said when you were on your extended career break or whatever, when you were sick or whatever, you were...
Sorting out kidneys, yeah?
Yeah. Huh? You said, taking me a text about podcasters treating people as viewers. And I said, well, I was actually going to, because I know you were sick or whatever, I was going to text you back and say, you are the greatest offender at that.
I'm not, because I always say for the viewers.
Do you? But you
always.
So I look...
So tune in, anybody who wants to see him looking blue, because there's something going on with the lights in here today. Anyway.
Yes.
Right, we're going to talk about Paul Beatty.
Who's having a blue old time.
He's having a blue time, yeah. He was once kind of like suspected of very serious crime. In actual fact, he would have been a suspect around the murder of Jason Buda Molyneax. We'll go back to who he is in a minute. But more recently, he's been on this kind of chaotic crime spree that involved stealing bikes and selling items that he could grab to any local fence, taking whatever money he can. I'm going to presume this was some sort of a drug-fueled spree for Beatty, who's 39.
Yeah, he's 39. And I suppose it does show you how organised crime can ends up for the majority of people.
Or how realistically most of it is disorganised and it's just an opportunistic grabbing of jobs freelance-wise when they're out there.
Well, maybe, but I suppose these people certainly would have been regarded with fear and sort of terror at one stage in their communities maybe, or would have been big shots who were making noise in the community. And Paul Beatty now is reduced. I mean, his crimes included, grabbing a package from a UPS driver, trying to shove it down his trousers, robbing a bike from an underground car park, robbing an e-scooter and a backpack. And he receives a lengthy sentence for it, 5 years.
And these crimes happened last year?
These all happened in a burst in 2025. In May 25.
Which, let's point out, was the year that the Gardaí have repeatedly stated there was no Gangland murder during. So Beatty, and he's only a suspect in the murder of Jason Buda Molyneax. He's never been charged in it. But if you remember, between the years of 2016 to pretty much 2017 and into a little bit of 2018, there was a lot of work for people in Gangland murder as spotters, as drivers, in other roles in that. We saw so many of them jailed for even things like buying mobile phone SIM cards. They were often very chaotic criminals who weren't necessarily fine-tuned assassins, but who were offered some work, offered some money, and who went with whatever there was available.
Yes, and of course that absolutely did happen. But Beatty would have been regarded as being, I suppose, quite a dangerous character. I mean, so... one of the things that obviously, as you said, Beatty was arrested for Jason Buda Molyneax's murder. He was arrested while he was serving a prison sentence in Mountjoy, and he was questioned and subsequently released without charge. But he would have known Buda Molyneax. Paul Beatty grew up in East Wall. They would have been contemporaries. He would have been contemporaries with many of the Hutches, would have been childhood friends with some of Gerard Hutch's nephews. And some of the value that Beatty had for the Kinahans and their associates was the fact that they were operating in the North Inner City, that they would have known movements, they would have been able to move around themselves. And Beatty, of course, had previously served a lengthy sentence for firearms offences in connection with a serious hit attempt on a guy called Dean Russell that we featured on the podcast before. So it was, I suppose, a very bitter little bit of that feud, because Beatty, and he did have a couple of associates who were linked to crimes against people that they had known all their lives and whose families they would have known all their lives.
Now, the murder of Jason Buda Molyneax was kind of the end. It was the last days, really, of the feud. Some would say the last sting of a dying wasp. And in particular, he had been accused and named in gangland circles as being one of the gunmen who went out to Ballymun area in an attempt to kill Derek Bottler Devoy, a very volatile criminal. Went to a home where Devoy was, and Devoy managed to escape. While his sister Antoinette Corbally was shot dead, a mother of 5, including in front of some of her own young children. And it was a botched hit. It was a really, it was a really chaotic one that from memory of the details of it, hadn't Derek Bottler Devoy run through the house and he'd grabbed a baby on his way, and there had been gunshots let off after him as he ran, as he fled, and she had sort of come from the kitchen to examine what was going on herself, and her friend Clinton
Shannon
were both killed during it. So Jason Buda Molyneax had been identified as one of those chaotic gunmen who'd carried that out. And of course, in the aftermath, Devoy, who'd already lost his brother, Mad Mickey Devoy, some years previous, was hell-bent on avenging his sister's murder. So in the January of 2018, Buda Molyneax was actually attending, I think, was he not? A wake of his friend.
Yeah, see, what had happened was Derek Coakley Hutch, a nephew of Gerard Hutch, who had been shot dead outside Wheatfield Prison, outside Clover Hill Prison. Now, Derek Coakley Hutch, I used to see him almost every week hanging around Talbot Street in the shops and stuff like that. Now, he had served a sentence for drug-related crime, chaotic sort of crime, but he was generally quite a harmless sort of character by all accounts. Certainly not one of the upper end of the Hutch organised crime gang or anything like it. But his childhood best friend was Jason Buda Molyneax. And Coakley Hutch was shot dead outside prison. He was
throwing drugs over the wall, wasn't he? And it was a very opportunistic hit. It was kind of in order for the Kinahan grouping, which was a merger of the Kinahan plus Kavanagh groupings, to try and up the figures as they were coming under pressure. And they were sort of going for anybody they could.
Yeah, and I think in fairness, Derek Coakley Hutch was the lowest of the, he was the lowest, the hanging fruit. I mean, a sort of harmless character, and he certainly had addiction problems and seemed to have recovered from them. And, really not somebody who should have been, not that anybody should be targeted. And of course, Bottler Devoy was mentioned in connection with that again, because at this point in the feud, the main people that had been tasked with carrying out shootings by the Kinahans originally, and if you look back to the murder of Eddie Hutch, you could see their most favoured operators. They were all either in prison, out of the country, or out of commission. So you were left with the kind of the lesser trusted guys to carry out these lesser trusted targets. And obviously somebody had, in this time, it is believed, had made contact with Bottler Devoy, some of the Bomber Kavanagh organisation, and offered him logistics support through people that could be hired for him and access to weapons. And Bottler Devoy was linked to both of these shootings, though never charged or anything like it. So what was offered, it is believed, was...
Well, Coakley Hutch had been murdered outside that prison, and was his wake not on or something? Or had Buda Molyneax, his friend, not gone to his house to empathise or sympathise with the mother?
And he'd left that. And in those 2 days between the shootings, between Coakley Hutch's shootings and Molyneax shootings, he had attacked a couple of people. He'd been going around...
Who had Molyneax?
Yes, and going around vowing revenge. And he was a genuinely dangerous character. While couldn't be considered exactly a member of the Hutch organised crime gang, certainly an associate of them, and one of the more dangerous of their associates, if not the most dangerous operating in that area. So he was leaving that after paying his respects, and he was shot, I think, 13 times in total. close to his home in the North Inner City. A van was used as a getaway vehicle. I think it was driven over to Ringsend, and then there was an attempt to set it on fire.
Was there a suggestion he'd gone to meet somebody?
Well, there was.
He wasn't wearing his bulletproof vest or something, and there was a suggestion that possibly he'd gone to meet somebody he knew. Yes,
there was a suggestion, though I don't know if that was ever clarified, but I think it did come up in the inquest, and he certainly did. There was these subcells, we would have called them, that Beatty would have been considered linked to, that would have known Buda Molyneax all his life, would have known everybody who knew him, but were operating in that part of the North Inner City and were being paid by the Kinahans, basically.
And again, as I said, there was a lot of money going around. I mean, the North Inner City in particular was flooded with money, with retainer money, etc. There was neighbours and former friends of the Hutch organised crime group and indeed the Hutch family who were being paid for information. I mean, it's not often that people in communities get paid for information. It's usually for actual action or activities that they get paid for. But nonetheless, we're all these years on, 8 years on, and Beatty goes on what could only be described as absolute low-level crime spree.
Yeah, I mean, Beatty in the meantime had been held in Mountjoy. He'd been in the sort of Kinahan wing, as it was broadly described, though again, I doubt Beatty ever met anybody senior in that organisation. And he had served 2 lengthy sentences for firearms offences. One in connection when he was arrested following that attempted hit on Dean Russell in 2010, and another one after the murder of Buda Molyneax, when he was caught with a firearm in the North Inner City and had been chased by police. So he gets out and he seems to have lapsed straight into addiction. And I suppose all of those years and all of those crimes that he got sucked into at the highest, at close to the highest level of organised crime, amount to nothing. And he goes on this crazy bender. I mean, some of the crimes are almost comical.
So how does he get 5 years? I mean, are these crimes clustered together, or are they separate charges, or it's a lengthy sentence for somebody for those kind of small...
Well, you see, that's what you think, right? But it isn't, and it is a lengthy sentence. I mean, 5 years, if you consider that he had served 7.5 years after being found with a firearm. I mean, this is only a couple of years less. But as you go through your life as a criminal and you keep reoffending and reoffending, so he's done 2 lengthy sentences for firearm offences, and all of a sudden he's back before a judge. Now, to us, we'd make a big distinction. Like, so what? He held a UPS guy with a knife and grabbed the package and tried to stuff it down his trousers. But when you start coming before the courts for that sort of stuff, and that, of course, is a serious offence. I'm not downplaying it.
Yeah.
For a delivery guy to be, but it's a kitchen knife. It's so. And then he says, actually, the UPS driver then returned from his lunch and also confronted Beatty, but he was threatened with the knife and made off with the package. Then he broke into the Royal College of Surgeons on Stephen's Green, which is a university, and got over a back wall, stole power tools, a high-vis jacket and a hard hat. I mean, so he has, but exactly, you're right. He has 85 previous convictions when he comes before the courts, including possession of firearms, many for road traffic offences. And the justice system looks at that and thinks, this guy is not learning. He doesn't get the credit for giving a second chance. He's in his late 30s now. He doesn't get the credit for being a young man. Presumably, he's not gone to court and said, I'm drug-free, I've done this or that. And he gets 5 years.
And 39, he's getting a bit too old for all of it, isn't he?
He's getting a bit too old.
It's not your theory that people calm down eventually? Or?
Well, it's an interesting... the studies have been done that sort of high-risk criminal, right, which is that sort of high-level robberies, firearms, bank robberies, that sort of thing, that they burn out in their 40s, particularly if they suffer from addictions. So
I was going to say, can they burn out if they suffer from addiction?
Well, they can.
Trying to feed it.
Because you go out to the guy. Well, you don't. They don't say then you reform and become a useful member of society, but you burn out from the high risk crime. So what you go from is somebody like Beatty in his 20s who's, presumably making a lot of money for these things. And then you become one of the guys you see on the side of the street who are shoplifting. And
so he has done that.
Well, that's what he looks like. He's following that course. And the course would be then that if somebody stays in addiction, they start suffering physical ailments. I mean, we walk down Talbot Street, there's a couple of guys you see with amputated limbs and things like that, it really catches up with you.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, he's back in jail anyway for the foreseeable, and we won't be hearing from him.
No.
For another little while.
No.
Thanks, Niall.
Thanks.
Have you checked out our new website, crimeworld.com, where you'll find ad-free exclusive content, including our new series, The Science of Fear, about the rise and fall of Daniel Kinahan's right-hand man, Thomas Bomber Kavanagh. Subscribers can listen to all 9 parts, but for those of you not yet signed up, here's an extract from part 1. It's July 25th. Ipswich Crown Court. 3 of Ireland's most notorious criminals flicker onto the courtroom screens from prisons across England. Thomas Bomber Kavanagh appears on Zoom from Belmarsh Prison, looking surprisingly tanned and trim in a dark grey t-shirt. Beside him on the screen, his lieutenants Gary Flash Vickery and Daniel Canning appear from other prisons, fidgeting in their seats. In contrast, Kavanagh sits bolt upright, with arms folded across his chest, and listens intently in an interview room with bathroom blue walls. As a female prison guard nips in and out of Kavanagh's interview room, the exasperated judge, Justice Martin Levitt, stops proceedings to scold, "We'll just wait for Belmarsh to stop coming in and out of the room because it's interrupting us yet again." Over the morning, there are various arguments set out by wigged barristers who call each other "my learned friend" in clipped British accents. But the outcome is clear. Kavanagh has 3 months to pay back more than €1.26 million in criminal assets, or face another 12 years in prison. One by one, the court strips him of his assets: luxury watches, designer clothes, equity in a Majorcan property, rental income, cash seized by police, and even the cost of a family holiday to Cancun. And the biggest blow, his half share of a fortified Tamworth mansion, the marble-floored stronghold where he reigned like an Italian mob boss in the English Midlands. The court was told his wife, Joanne Byrne, the sister of David Byrne, who was murdered in the Regency, had not responded to a court notice. Kavanagh, sitting at a wooden desk in Belmarsh, betrays no sign of emotion at the prospect of losing the family home. But behind that blank stare is a man who once weaponised fear with precision. Police wiretaps revealed a mobster, almost scientific, in his obsession with torture, casually calculating exactly how much pain he could inflict, terrifying men into loyalty without paralysing them completely. Britain's National Crime Agency finally brought him down, jailing him for 26 years. Now, here in Ipswich Crown Court, they're dismantling what's left of his empire. And then, one final twist. It appears that Bomber couldn't do his time. In a scheme that wouldn't have been out of place in a Guy Ritchie movie, Kavanagh tried to shave some time off his 21-year sentence for drug smuggling by orchestrating a plot from behind bars. Hoping to dupe authorities into handing him a lighter sentence, he tried to lead the National Crime Agency officers to a weapons stash. Instead, he was rumbled and slapped with another 6 years. We spoke to some of the NCA officers who were involved in taking Bomber down, including one who was tasked with following the money. It was a job that took him across international borders.
This particular case, I would say, was complex because we had overseas assets in Ireland and in Spain, Lanzarote, And there was also the inquiries when pulling together the investigation as well, because there was Dutch hauliers involved. There was drugs were coming in, say, from the Netherlands. They were coming in from Spain. So there was quite a lot of international partners we were involved with when we were pulling this together. So the actual value of the drugs, which was agreed on between the prosecution and defence, eventually was 10,470,833, and that was it was 3,750,833 of cannabis and 6,720,000 pounds worth of cocaine. The benefit figure for Thomas, with all the other assets involved, we agreed on just over 12 million of benefit from his criminality. And we started off somewhere around 15, 16 million. So we've come down about 4 million. And the majority of that is the difference in value of the drugs. Knowing the significance of him, it was really great result to get him convicted and now to get the confiscation order against him as well and have that benefit hanging over him.
Officers who went through the rows of designer gear in Bomber's gated mansion were astonished at the sheer scale of luxury goods. The drug proceeds had been splurged on luxury and security in almost equal measure. The place was sealed, reinforced doors, bulletproof glass, and cameras covering every approach. Inside was a display of wealth that would rival that of Imelda Marcos. Money was lavished on Moncler jackets, a shoe collection worthy of a Saudi princess, and a watch collection fit for a Premier League dressing room. The list goes on. 30 pairs of identical Armani jeans, Gucci labels, a collection of handbags that a Kardashian would be proud of. This was how the cartel's profits were laundered, through spending sprees and rolls of cash handed across the shop counters in Harrods. The definition of ill-gotten gains was hanging in wardrobes in his luxury mansion in Tamworth. Cartel members know the risk of peddling drugs across international borders, but when officers start rifling through their six-figure wardrobes, confiscating their luxury watches and handbag collections, it does hit a nerve.
A lot of criminals are quite happy, getting imprisoned for the crime is part of the job. But when you actually say, now we're going to take all your assets, that's when it gets personal, because that's the reason they're committing crime, is for their lifestyle. That's their job. And we are then taking it all away or getting an order to take it away. So that's when it can get quite personal.
The court's inventory of Bomber's lavish spending gave an inkling into just how far removed he'd become from the day-to-day drug trade. He oversaw the delegation of smuggling routes, of finance and of enforcement to trusted lieutenants. The proceedings in Ipswich Crown Court didn't just mark the fall of Thomas Bomber Kavanagh's personal empire. They also signalled something far bigger. Bomber's collapse marks the first true fracture in what had long looked like an impenetrable underworld machine. The cartel's chief strategist, the man who kept its international supply lines running smoothly, had finally been taken down. Seen as untouchable for years, his sentence for importing tens of millions of pounds of drugs was a major shot across the bow of the Kinahan Cartel. And just 2 weeks after Kavanagh's sentencing, the United States raised the stakes.
And so today, the United States Department of State is pleased to announce a reward of up to $5 million for information leading to the financial disruption of the KTCO or the arrest and convictions of its leaders, Christopher Vincent Kinahan, Daniel Joseph Kinahan, and Christopher Kinahan Jr.
You've been listening to an extract from our 9-part series, The Science of Fear, about the rise and fall of Daniel Kinahan's right-hand man, Thomas Bomber Kavanagh. To listen to all 9 parts, log on to crimeworld.com and hit subscribe.